Alright, so in this Knife Thoughts video, I'm going to be reviewing this knife, and this is the Reeve large Inkosi with natural micarta inlays. And Reeve is a knife company that is pretty well known within the knife community, in the knife market. They gained popularity because they introduced this frame lock, which has become a really popular lock, as well as the all titanium modern folder. And a little bit of backstory real quick. Reeve is from South Africa, started by making custom knives. Particularly, he was inspired because he was required to do some military service and wanted a better knife, and started making custom knives, then started making production knives. And that's really where they became popular, where Reeve knives became popular, is in making a very high quality production knife. So like I said, they came out with the knife called the Sebenza, which is a word that means worker. And it was a really high quality knife from a manufacturing standpoint. Really high tolerances, well built, and it introduced this frame lock. Like I said, lots of knives have that now, and it's become really popular. And since then, they've continued to improve upon the design. And the Inkosi is a new knife. It's really a replacement for what they were calling the Sebenza 25. And they made some slight changes, and it is now the Inkosi. They brought the Inkosi out in 2016, so it's a relatively new model for Reeve knives. And there's a couple things that they changed from older Sebenza and other models. So before they introduced the Inkosi, they introduced the Umnumzon, I'm not sure if I'm saying that right, with some of the updates that this has, like it has a ceramic ball bearing detent and lock interface. So it's kind of hard to see with the knife assembled, but you can see right there, there's kind of a semicircle. That's the detent hole, and the detent ball is, you can see it shining right there. It's a ceramic ball that when the knife locks, rather than the titanium interfacing with the steel of the blade, it's the ceramic ball that interfaces. And that is an upgrade, in my opinion, to a typical frame lock. I'll talk about that in a little bit here, but has some other updates. It has the angled, or what they call the canted clip. So instead of this clip going straight up onto the lock bar, which would for some people create some hot spots and things like that, it's slightly canted so that it's going on to the solid part of the frame here. And for me, it feels good in the hand. It doesn't create a hot spot or anything. So I have only had one Sebenza and one Umnumzon, and it was a long time ago, so I don't have a great comparison, but I definitely think that this is a good position for this clip. It doesn't feel like it has created any hot spots for me in the use that I've put in on this knife. Another thing that it has is a floating stop pin. So this is actually not, this stop pin is not actually screwed in on this side of the knife. It is floating in there, so there's no connection. It's just screwed in on this side. And that helps it to move so that it adjusts, it doesn't get worn in too much. It also just makes it a little simpler, I think, so that you don't adjust this screw right here and possibly squeeze the washers and things like that. Speaking of the washers, it has new washers, and you can actually see them on this larger version. Apparently on the smaller version, the small Inkosi, there is a pocket cut out into the titanium for the washers so that they're a little bit less exposed, but on the larger version there's not. But these new washers are held in place by their shape, so they extend down to this stop pin, and then you can see they come all the way to the edge of the locking area right there. And they do have cutouts in them, like other washers from Reeve knives, like on the Sebenza, that allow lubrication to sit in them better so that it stays smoother and then lubricated better. So this is a little different washer design compared to other Chris Reeve knives. Now it also has, people have noticed it has a deeper hollow grind. So that means that the grind has the angle a little higher, and then it should be thinner towards the edge for better slicing. And Chris Reeve, Representative Chris Reeve, actually said that that was just because they have a new grinder, but it is an improvement in my opinion, because a nice thin, deep or high hollow grind is a good grind. It leaves a good amount of material up here towards the spine so that it's nice and strong, and it makes it nice and thin towards the edge so that it slices well. And as stupid as it is, I actually have used this knife for a little bit of prying, just opening up a thing, making a shelf, basically starting to bend a tab so that it holds it in place, because I didn't have anything else and I was trying to get it done, and it worked fine, didn't hurt it at all. And that's partly because, as you can see, the spine does have a good amount of thickness all the way to the tip there. Let's see what else. The tang here has a groove for the ceramic ball detent, so it has a little bit of a groove there that makes it a little smoother. Some people have commented that it has a different sound on lockup than a Sebenza, so I'll stop talking and let you hear that. Someone said it's more of a talk than a tick, and I think that is a relatively good description of it. It is a little bit softer and less abrupt of a sound when it locks up than on Sebenzas I've seen and the one I had and on videos. So it's a little different, but I do think that it makes it nice and smooth. And detent ramps, which is what I've seen this called elsewhere, are generally an extra manufacturing step, so it's appreciated on a higher end knife like this. And now one thing that it doesn't have that I consider to be a downside is the pivot is not a bushing pivot. So one thing about the Sebenza that a lot of people like and that has helped to make it popular is that the pivot is a bushing pivot. And what that means is that you can tighten down the pivot as much as it will go, and it won't pinch against the tang of the knife or the blade, because it actually stops there. And that's a nice thing because it allows you to tighten it the whole way down and not have to worry about it being too tight or messing with it, trying to adjust it between too tight so that it's not smooth opening or too loose so that it has blade play. And I do appreciate that. Another knife that's well known for having that is the Paramilitary 2 from Spyderco, and a lot of people like it on that knife also. So that's something that the Inkosi doesn't have, and I'm not sure why. Now this pivot is a larger pivot than is on the Sebenzas. At least that's what I've read. So it's a little larger. I'm not sure if that's part of why it's not a bushing pivot or not, but for me, I do wish if I was making my ideal, Chris Reeve Inkosi, it would have a bushing pivot, just so that you don't have to worry about this. I did take it apart to clean it and everything like that and re-lube it, and it wasn't difficult to get it to the point where it was smooth but didn't have blade play, but it would just be a little bit simpler if you didn't have to worry about that. You could just tighten it down and it'd be good to go. But like I said, I did take it apart and put it back together with no trouble. It's relatively simple to take apart and put back together because this isn't a screw, and the pivot, how it works, it is a female and male pivot or screws, which is how I've heard it described. It's a screw that goes into the tube of the other screw there. So relatively simple to take apart and put back together, but still I would prefer the bushing pivot. Now one last thing that's different is that the blade, I've heard and read, is a little bit thicker than a Sebenza. Now like I said, I don't have a Sebenza to compare it to. I wish I did, because the specs, the specifications on this knife are a little bit not the same everywhere, but I've seen it having a 0.14 inch thickness blade. I don't have calipers, so I didn't measure it. but I've seen Sebenzas said to have a 0.14 inch thick blade also, but I've seen them also said to have a 0.125 and 0.13. So it's said that it's a little beefier or thicker, and that goes into the general idea of this knife that it's a beefier Sebenza. So the Inkosi is a word that means chief. So Sebenza means worker and Inkosi means chief. And I think that the idea here is that this is a little bit beefier of a knife. It has a 3.6 inch blade and it's 4.8 inches closed. The large Sebenza is pretty close to that actually, but just overall it's meant to have a little bit beefier of a feel to it. So it's a nice knife. It came to me with really nice action, smooth. A lot of times Chris Reeve fans will say it's glassy action, and it does feel a little different than action on other knives that are really smooth. And I'm going to show you a bunch of knives to compare it to and why different reasons to compare them to it. But it's well made. It came with no blade play. Like I said, I was able to put it back together with no blade play. It came pretty well centered, pretty much exactly where it is now, slightly away from the clip side, and it came back pretty much exactly where it was, where it came to me. It came back to the same place when I reassembled it. So well made, nicely centered, nice action, no blade play. So a nice knife for sure, and the design I actually really like. So I like the look, to be honest, of the Sebenza 21 and now the new Sebenza 31 with the more simple handle without the finger grooves. And I even like the plain version without the inlays better. I just like those simple lines. It's one of the reasons I'm a big fan of Ray Laconico's designs, if that's how you say his name. Hope that's right. So I originally, when I got this, wasn't sure that I would like the looks of it as much as the more plain Sebenza design. But in getting it and using it, I've carried this a good bit, I've used it a good bit. I actually really like how these finger grooves feel. It's funny, sometimes finger grooves fit your hand perfectly, sometimes they don't. I have knives, or I've had knives that everyone seems to love the way it feels in their hand, and it doesn't fit my hand right. A good example of that, to talk about it again, is the Paramilitary 2. I don't like the ergonomics of the Paramilitary 2. On the other hand, I expected to not like the ergonomics of this and ended up really liking them. It feels really good in the hand. I've used this like carving wood and stuff, and it hasn't given me hot spots. Feels nice and secure. And not only did I not think that I would like the look of these inlays, I actually have always been kind of against, philosophically, I guess, or theoretically or something, the idea of inlays that are not mechanically attached. So these are just put on with, I think they say automotive adhesive tape is what they say. And everyone says, oh, it's never going to come off. It's perfectly fine. It's going to stay on. And I've always thought it's probably true, but I just don't like the idea of it. Well, I have used these a lot, and they've not shown any, tendency towards coming off at all. And I actually do like the way they add a little bit of heftiness to it. You can feel these inlays on your fingers, and it does seem to give you a place to hold or a little bit of purchase when you're using the knife. So I actually ended up liking the inlays more than I expected to, and this particular knife, my knife, has natural micarta inlays. Now, compared to other pictures or pictures of other knives with the natural micarta inlays, Chris Reeve knives that I've seen, these are a lot darker. I did get this secondhand, and I got it at a great deal, which again I'll talk about later. But I think that it's just because it's been used, it probably has gotten oil from my hands and the previous user's hands and everything like that. But it's just normal natural micarta, even if it looks different on the video here. One quick note on that also, I am in a new place, so I'm trying to figure out where the best place to film is, and I'm not sure how the lighting will look yet. But I did end up liking these micarta inlays, and I was a little bit surprised by it, to be honest. So that's another thing that I didn't really expect to like. or I guess I didn't expect to love it, and I ended up liking it quite a bit. So I like the design, I like the knife, I appreciate the history, the fact that Chris Reeve Knives has won so many awards for highest quality production knife or best production knife at Blade Show, things like that. I appreciate all of that, but it's a really expensive knife. So this knife, normally, if you buy it firsthand from a dealer, is like $550. I think that sometimes they do go a little on sale, but very rarely, and that's generally the price that you'd pay from a dealer for this knife. So it's an extremely expensive knife. Certainly there are more expensive knives, but as production knives go, it's very expensive. And there are some reasons for that. So first of all, like I said, they are known for very high tolerances. They make sure that everything is done right, and I think that that's true. I also think that that's true of some other companies and other knives that aren't as expensive. They also are constantly innovating. They innovated the frame lock itself. They've made adjustments across different models, the different Sebenza models, as well as the Umnumzon, now the Inkosi, and it made improvements like the ceramic ball bearing lock interface. I really like it. I think that it's a really great improvement. I've had knives like my Spyderco Chalkway that develop so much lock stick that they're unusable. I literally don't even have that knife. It was my favorite knife for a long time to carry and use, and I don't even keep it with my carry knives anymore because it's just basically unusable. And the reason for that is if you have a knife that has a frame lock, a titanium frame lock specifically, the titanium is softer than the steel, because on production knives, the tang is generally going to be hardened also. Now, on some custom knives, they can differentially harden the blade, and the blade can be hard and the tang can be soft. That also is actually done on traditional knives, specifically Great Eastern Cutlery differentially hardens their knives. They have the whole blade hardened, and then they soften or temper the tang so that the backspring doesn't wear as quickly. So that's a really interesting thing. One of my favorite things that I learned when I first went to Great Eastern Cutlery and took the factory tour, because that's kind of an interesting extra manufacturing step that they take and shows that they care about that long-term longevity of their knives. But when a knife has a titanium frame lock and a steel blade, and the blade is hardened, the titanium frame lock is going to be much, much softer than the tang of the knife. So what happens is this titanium wears away at every time it opens. When it goes across the tang of the knife, some of the titanium rubs off onto the steel. And that does two things. One, it contributes to taking away from the life of the lock, basically. The more that wear happens, the quicker the frame lock will move across the blade, and basically after a while it'll start to have lock rock. The second thing is that it can start to have galling, and I'm not 100% sure I say that correctly. I've looked up a lot about it because I've had so much trouble with it on that Chalkway. But what it is the titanium starts to actually bond to the steel and stick to it. And that's what you are hearing about when you hear the term lock stick. So lock stick is galling, basically, and it's the softer titanium bonding to the steel of the blade. And I hope everyone already assumes it, but I'm not a metallurgist. It'd be cool if I was. I'm not a physical scientist, I'm not super up on the chemical processes or even mechanical processes of how it happens, but that's what happens, and lock stick can be really, really frustrating. It can make it so that you have to use a screwdriver to unlock the lock and close the knife. And eventually that will make it unusable, like the Chalkway, like I said. So this is one way to work around that. Basically what they do is they take a ceramic ball and they fit it down into a cutout on the frame so that it actually sticks up above this frame slightly. Then they press it in. So it's pressed in, so it is mechanically held in. It's not just glued in. And I made sure to check that out when I took it apart. It's very clearly pressed in. So the ceramic ball is actually harder than the steel. So it's not gonna stick. You're pretty much never gonna have lock stick on a knife like this that has a ceramic ball detent or lock interface. So that's a big upgrade to me, because if a knife is $550, I don't want it to become unusable after a few years, and then in the example, unfortunately, of the Spyderco Chalkway, have the company tell you that they can't do anything to improve the function of the knife, which was frustrating with the Chalkway. But I certainly wouldn't want that to happen on a $550 knife. So I like that. But one thing to be aware of is that there are other workarounds to that. So here is, speaking of Spyderco, a Spyderco with a steel lock bar insert. So this is a piece of steel that presumably is hardened to the same hardness as the blade and is actually screwed into this titanium lock bar so that the steel is what is interfacing with the blade. So that should take away from that lock stick also. Now, I would say because it's possible that this isn't heat treated quite the same or slightly softer, that it's more likely that this will wear than the ceramic, because ceramic is just really hard. But I think that this is a very viable other option to work around the lock wear and lock stick. So there are other ways to do it than the way that Chris Reeve Knives decided on. Now, one thing, speaking of, the company telling you that they couldn't do anything about a knife, Chris Reeve Knives is known for having really good service and a really good warranty. They have what people call a spa service. So you can send your knife in after it's gotten beat up. You can see mine has lots of what they call snail trails and things like that. And they will re-bead blast it, they will refinish it, they can even refinish the blade, they can replace the blade for a fee. They can re-heat treat the lock bar so that it has the right amount of tension. They pretty much can make the knife as close to new as it can be. So that's a really great service that they have, and I really appreciate that. And I think that that is a big part of the cost. So I think that's, contributes to the cost of the knife, having that service. One thing that I do want to note is that when you read the warranty on Chris Reeve Knives website, it very clearly says that the warranty applies only to the original owner of the knife. Now, I'm sure that that has something to do with legality. I'm sure that a lawyer told Chris Reeve Knives that they should put that wording, and I don't think that it matters that much, but it is the wording of the warranty. And if you've seen my video on EC knives, which a lot of people have problems with, or my post on it, the wording of a warranty is really not what matters. What the warranty says doesn't matter that much, and people say, oh, well, if they don't follow their warranty, you can sue them. But they know that nobody's going to do that, right? And it goes the other way also. A warranty can be worded so that it only applies to the original owner of the knife, but they can not follow that. They can apply the warranty to as many subsequent owners of the knife as they want, and by all accounts, that is what they do. I looked a lot, actually, when I first got this knife, and I haven't found a single account of someone saying that Chris Reeve Knives would not honor the warranty because they weren't the original owner of the knife. Now, if you modify the knife or damage it through abuse, then they will, not honor the warranty, but that's fair. I just didn't see any examples of them not honoring the warranty specifically because the person trying to use the warranty wasn't the original owner. So like I say, the wording of a warranty doesn't matter as much as its application and the people behind it. And it seems like, by all accounts, the application of the Chris Reeve Knives warranty is very, very fair, very generous. They want to make sure that people are happy with their knives, and they are proud of their knives and go out of their way to make sure that they keep people happy with their knives. So the warranty is very, very highly regarded, and I have not used it, but I believe that it is, well applied and a good warranty. So I think that probably contributes to the price. The materials also can contribute to the price. This is a lot of titanium. It's a full titanium knife. And the steel is S35VN. I guess it doesn't say it on it, but Chris Reeve Knives actually helped or contributed or collaborated to develop that steel with crucible particle metals. I think that's CPM, yeah. So that can contribute to the cost of the knives. All of that said, I think that the biggest contributor, or at least the most important contributor that makes this knife a $550 knife rather than even a $350 knife, is the history, is the reputation, and is the name Chris Reeve Knives on the knife, Idaho made, and the general brand of the knife. Now, I'm sure some people will be irritated by that, tell me how I'm wrong, and that, there's all these reasons why it costs as much as it does. And I'm not saying that it's not worth that. Now, I am saying that I won't pay full price for a Chris Reeve knife. It's not because I don't think it's worth it, or that I don't think it's ever worth it to anybody, or that it's overpriced and I don't want to support them because of that. It's just because it's expensive. It's $550 can buy me like 5 GEC knives, or 2 really nice modern knives from another company, even American made modern knives. So I won't buy Chris Reeve knives currently, and I always reserve the right to change my opinion, but currently at their primary market price. And I'm going to give you some examples of knives that have all of those aspects that make this knife special that are lower priced. So first, I'm going to show one that kind of has a few of them. So this is the mass drop produced, Ray Laconico designed, we manufactured, kind of a lot there, always funny saying all those things, Keen. And this is a full titanium frame lock, so same titanium material presumably. It has a frame lock with a steel insert, so not the same, but still kind of mitigates those issues of lock stick and lock wear. And it's extremely smooth, just extremely smooth. I would say differently smooth, but honestly more smooth than the Inkosi. It also has just as solid lockup. This knife is super, super solid. I've taken it apart and put it back together, and it's just locks up really solid. So it has that really bank vault feel to it. It has the same materials, titanium, and I think it actually has the same steel. Yeah, it does, S35VN steel. Same steel, so same materials. Has the same lock. It has that innovation to mitigate the issues with the lock. So it has a lot of those things that make this knife so nice. What it doesn't have is it's not made in the United States, and although Mass Drop says that they, will honor, if you have an issue, you can contact them and everything, I feel pretty strongly that the warranty and service on this knife is going to be significantly better than on this knife. It's made in the USA, you can contact them directly, and they're well known to have a good warranty. Can't say the same for this. Mass Drop is based in the US, but this knife is produced in China, and I'm not talking bad about Mass Drop or anybody involved in it, but I just don't think that they've shown themselves to have quite the level of service and quality warranty that Chris Reeve Knives has. Again, I haven't used this warranty either, so I'm not sure, but it's just one of those things where a long track record here. So not made in the United States and not as much of a track record for service. Now, another knife that is USA made and has a lot of those same characteristics is the Spyderco Native 5 in fluted titanium. So this knife has full titanium scales. It has CPM, where is it? S35VN, so same steel, and it's very, very smooth. Now this knife, like this knife actually, they both have a break-in period for sure, but this knife is very smooth. Now it's a different kind of smoothness again than either of the previous two because it's a backlock, so there's always pressure on the blade. So it does feel a little different, but it's very smooth. It locks up super solid, and this one is made in the United States. So it's made in Golden, Colorado by Spyderco. The only thing that this one doesn't have is that same kind of spa service and really high quality warranty service that Chris Reeve Knives is known for. Spyderco is, I think, currently doing a good job of improving the general view of their warranty. But like I said, I've had good and bad experiences. I've had good experiences with Spyderco's warranty. They also, told me that they couldn't do anything to improve the function of my chalkway, which is really frustrating. So I think that that's what this knife lacks as compared to this knife. Speaking of specifics, I want to talk about the frame lock itself. The frame lock is a really popular knife lock style, and it's partly because the marketing that companies have done that says that it's the strongest or the most secure or the safest lock. And the big argument there is that when you're holding the knife, as long as you're holding it, you're pressing this lock bar in and keeping the knife locked. While that's partly true, you don't always use a knife in a hammer grip like this. You sometimes use it in a pinch grip. You might even use it up high like this. So you're not always going to be doing that. Now, the frame lock, I think, is a fine lock for normal use, general use, even most hard use. It's going to be totally, totally fine, as all locks are. And even I use slip joints for pretty hard use sometimes. So I think that it's a fine lock. I don't have any problem with it. I have lots of knives with it. But it's not stronger than other locks. And the reason for that is because for a frame lock to be comfortable to use, it has to have a cutout. So you can see this cutout here. That makes it so that it's not unnecessarily difficult to press this lock bar across. It's basically just a spring, and this makes it easier to press across. Titanium is less strong than steel. A lot of times you hear titanium stronger per weight than steel. That's true, but in this size, it's less strong. So, for example, actually I'm going to start with this one. A steel frame lock like this is going to be stronger than a titanium frame lock with the same design. But one thing that I do like about the Chris Reeve knives is that the cutouts actually leave a good amount of steel. So if you look, there's significantly less steel left at that cutout on this Kershaw Decimus, I think, based on the Maximus by Hinderer. But there's significantly less steel left than there is titanium left on the Inkosi. You can see these two areas here. So I do think that this is a strong frame lock as frame locks go, and I'll show you an example, actually two examples. Here is that WE Knives, or I guess Mastrop Laconico Keen again, and you can see that there is less steel left at that cutout on the Keen than there is on the Inkosi. Another example, the Spyderco Domino, you can see it's like half as thick. So there's significantly less titanium left on these other two frame locks than on the Chris Reeve. And that was true, I remember, on the Sabenza and Numzon that I had. And I think that it is a nice touch. The fact that it is still really easy to unlock and use, but leaves a really good amount of steel. Or I'm sorry, not steel, titanium. Now, an example where it's getting close, this is a Rat 1. Everybody knows the Rat 1. And it has a steel liner lock, but because it's a relatively thick liner lock, it gets towards the same thickness of titanium that is left on the Inkosi. And because steel is stronger than titanium, I'm not sure which knife has a stronger lock. Again, the main thing to remember is that both are going to be strong enough for pretty much anything you're going to use them for. Moving into another aspect of the knife that people really like, I talked about the smoothness, is the really solid lockup. I've been talking about it a little bit, but another totally different kind of lock that has that same kind of really solid lockup is the Spyderco, what is this called? I'm forgetting what it's called. But this lock here, and compression lock. I can't believe I couldn't think of that for a second. The compression lock is a really, really strong lock. It gives a really bank vault feel lock to it in my experience with all of my knives that have had this lock. So it gives that really strong bank lock feel, and in my opinion, a lot of Spyderco's back locks even give that really solid lockup. No forward and back blade play like some older back locks do have. Now, all of that said, I've shown you a bunch of examples of knives that are less expensive. I'll run through it real quick. This knife was like $150. This knife was one on a giveaway, but it's like $30 or $40. This knife was traded for, but I think it was originally like $150, something like that. Made in Taiwan on that one. Same deal, but $30 on the Rat 1. Then the American-made Native 5 titanium. This one was a gift, but I think these were like $250 originally. And this is also a gift, but these were like $180 or $175 originally. And this is made in Japan. So all of these knives are significantly less than half the price, and some less than a tenth the price of this knife. So all of those knives also had at least some of the characteristics that make this knife so desirable. So what it all comes down to for me is the fact that I really enjoy this knife. I've really enjoyed having it. It's a really nice design. It's a knife that has a lot of history, a lot of innovation put into it, and it's a really well-made, nice knife. It has a lot of nice characteristics, but in today's market, for me, I just can't bring myself to pay full dealer price on Chris Reeve knives. Thankful that I was able to find this knife for a really good deal. You can follow on Instagram if you search Bear Skull, the person who I bought this from, and they post some really cool pictures, so I do suggest checking them out. But I'm glad to have gotten it at a good price because I think it's a knife worth having if you are able to find it at a good price, or if you don't mind that dealer price. It's worth having just because, as a knife enthusiast, this is a knife or an evolution of the knives from Chris Reeve knives that really helped to bring modern knives to the point that they're at now, where we can get, a knife like this that's a really well-made knife with a lot of those features for a lot less, even considering it's made, not in America and doesn't maybe have the same warranty level. But this knife and other knives from Chris Reeve have helped bring the knife market and the knife community to the point that it's at, and I really believe that we're in a golden age of knives. There's such a variety of really, really nice knives at all levels of budget, and we owe at least a significant part of that to Chris Reeve knives. So that's why I'm happy to have gotten this knife and to get to show it to you and talk about it. And I appreciate if you're still watching, because I know I've been talking about this knife for almost 40 minutes. So check out knifethoughts.com, where I post articles on knives like this, knife-related topics, educational articles, things like that. Please like this video, subscribe to my channel here, and hit the bell for notifications so you know when I post new videos. And also check out my Instagram at knifethoughts, where I post a lot of pictures and in-use pictures and things like that. And as always, don't forget to go out and do good.